Hello, everybody. I'm Tommy Waller. I'm excited to be on the show today. I'm the president and founder of HaYovel, and I am a Christian Zionist.
And I am Kimberly Troup, and I am the U.S. Director of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, and I too am a Christian Zionist.
And I'm Sondra Oster Baras. I'm the director of the Israel Office of Christian Friends of Israeli Communities, and I am an Orthodox Jew. We have a great program planned for you all today. We're going to be talking about something that is extremely happy, the birth of new babies. And, that's a happy occasion for everybody, no matter what your faith is, or if you don't have a faith, who doesn't love a baby and who doesn't celebrate a new baby? But what we want to do today is kind of share between us some of the different customs that Jews and Christians have, customs that have to do with our faiths and how we, each of us, in our own way, celebrate the birth of a new baby.
And, when I came up with this topic, or when we talked about it, it came out of some just private conversations that you and I had over the years, Sondra. And, one of the things, just for me, I don't even know if I've ever told you this. When I was a teenager, I said to myself, now I really didn't have much knowledge, so forgive me for this, but I said to myself, when I get married and I have a child, if I have a baby boy, I'm going to get a rabbi to circumcise him.
Okay.
Don't ask me why I thought that. I couldn't even tell you. I just thought that they knew what they were doing, and they did it the right way, and they did it according to the Bible, and that's what I wanted. Now, I had no understanding of what that was, or why a rabbi would look at me and go, no, I don't think so. So, why don't you talk to us a little bit about circumcision in this, because one of the things that I think people they might find an odd custom, or they might not understand it. And I think a lot of, when we're talking about facing the divide, we're really talking about explaining some of these interior things that go on that might be cause for conflict, or might be cause for anti-Semitic feelings over the years. So I know one of the customs that we find is very odd is not telling us what the baby's name is. Come on already. My children were named before they were born, and we were calling them by name, and everybody knew their name. So give us some insight onto, this naming and the brit, and go from there.
Okay. Well, first of all, circumcision, as you all know, is in the Bible. And it first appears in Genesis 17, when God commands Abraham to circumcise himself and to circumcise the men in his family. And it is the word that we use for circumcision in Hebrew is a brit. Now, it doesn't really mean brit. Circumcision, the real word for circumcision in Hebrew is milah. That's what circumcision is. But when everybody refers to circumcision, they use the word brit, or brit milah. Brit means covenant. And that really is the essence of the whole thing. And if I just look, at verse chapter 7, Genesis 17, verse 10, such shall be the covenant between you and me, between me and you and your offspring to follow, which you shall keep. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and that shall be the sign of the covenant between me and you. And throughout the generations, every male among you shall be circumcised at the age of 8 days. So that's really the beginning of the whole thing. And later on, when, after Moses gives the 10 Commandments, and we have, after Sinai, we have all the commandments listed, and the rest of the end of Exodus and Leviticus. So in Leviticus, we have a more specific commandment about this, and that's in Leviticus 12. On the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Okay? So this is really the two sources of this custom. It's not a custom; it's a commandment. Okay, but I think it's very important to understand what this covenant is about. And I think the reason why the rabbi would not want to circumcise you because you're not part of the covenant.
Right.
The covenant is only between the children of Israel and or the nation of Israel and God. Now I realize Christianity sees itself as having some other sort of covenant, grafted in. There's all these other, ways of looking at it. But even Christianity never saw itself as part of the covenant to the extent of having to be circumcised. In fact, I believe that initially, the early Christians, they were Jews and they were circumcised, and this was an issue for the Gentiles. And at some point, if I remember correctly, what I know a little bit about what I know about Christianity, Paul said at some time, it's okay, you don't need to do that.
Right.
So even Christianity, from its very beginning, understood that this was a covenantal relationship between God and the Jewish people, and it's not for anybody else. And it's a sign. That's what God says to Abraham. This is a sign of the covenant. This actual searing of the flesh. There's something so physical about it that is, and it's very symbolic. The fact that it is dafka is specifically done at a place of reproduction, as an organ that is responsible for bringing the next generation. That there's this covenant that is sealed, beginning with Abraham. God's promise to Abraham, I will give this land to your children. This is the children part of that, that there is continuity, that there's the children that will continue with the circumcision. These are the children that are going to be part of this covenant with God, part of the nation of Israel. So that's the, and it's done on the 8th day. One thing though, I must emphasize, never done in any way that could possibly endanger the baby. So first of all, it's a ritual circumciser. It's not necessarily a rabbi, and most rabbis are not ritual circumcisers. You have to be trained, and it's a very physical type of training. You learn how to do it.
Well, it's a surgery.
It's like a surgery, right? But it's done in the traditional way. It's done without anesthetic usually. It is usually not particularly painful for the baby, very minor. And usually the baby is kind of shocked right afterwards and sleeps for several hours. It's very nice. It's a good rest for the mother. It's the only solid block of sleep that baby's going to have, in those first few weeks. So it's fine. I have 4 sons and 8 grandsons. So we've done many of these ceremonies and the babies all do great. But so this is, of course, the way, what it's all about. It's about identity and it's about covenant. You asked about the baby name. So this is something that developed afterwards. You don't see in the Bible anything about naming the baby, but the custom is developed that this is the point where I'll go backwards. Okay. The baby, by having the circumcision, the baby enters into the covenant. That's what the ceremony is all about. And the words of prayer that we say, we basically are blessing God and thanking God and praying to God for this baby who has just now entered into the covenant of Abraham. That's what we call it. So you give the naming at that time, and what you're basically saying in the name, you're saying, and his name shall be called in Israel. Right. Because by naming this baby, you are giving him an identity in Israel. And you are saying this baby is, whatever his name is, Samuel, okay, son of somebody or other who is already in Israel. So it's so much part of that, the identity. Now, so you could really tell, there's nothing wrong with saying to someone, by the way, we decided to name him, whatever. But it's developed this custom that you don't say the name. Of course, the husband and wife are talking about it and whatever, but you don't say it because you want the first announcement of that name to be when he takes his place in the covenant of Israel, covenant of Abraham. And so that's really what it's about. Really, it's not a big deal, but it's just how we do it. And so typically, in any case in Israel, girls, by the way, there is a naming procedure for girls as well, no circumcision. But typically, also, a girl will receive her name in the synagogue. When the father will be called to the Torah and will make a blessing on the Torah, and then he will announce the name. And but that can be done any of the 3 days of the week that we pull out the Torah and read it, which is Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. So it's not that big of a deal in terms of, it's not a big party or something like that. Although, some people do make big parties for the girls, but then they don't have to do it on the 8th day. They can wait till the mother is recovered a little bit. And
Right.
make a party. So, but yeah, that's a big deal. It's a really big deal.
Well, and I think that one of the things, I guess, maybe that I knew growing up, and this is probably where I was coming from, is that medically, it's been proven that on the 8th day is when I believe it's vitamin K is the highest, which is the blood clotting vitamin that your body needs. And so again, it's just that whole miraculous part of it, of how God ordained something knowing that this would be the best for all of mankind, and like, just God ordains it. And I think that's probably where I was coming from with why I wanted a rabbi to do it on the 8th day.
It's very interesting that you mentioned this.
I do understand now why a rabbi wouldn't do this.
No, but I think it's very interesting you mentioned the vitamin K and the blood clotting, because this is something that is very important to say. As in all commandments, we believe God also commanded us to look out for our health. Okay, you must watch your health. This is something very important that is commanded to us. So therefore, no commandment should ever be carried out if it in some way is going to endanger your health. So if you have a baby, for example, who has an illness, or for some reason circumcision on the 8th day would endanger him, then they delay the circumcision to ensure that it is done in health. So very often, if you have babies that were preemies, or they're jaundiced or whatever, even if it's not like a serious thing, they will wait until it is determined that the baby is totally out of any danger and that circumcision would not endanger him in any way.
Awesome. Well, and I think it's the other part that I found interesting, because I believe one of your grandsons, you had a brit on a Shabbat, and that circumcision happens on the 8th day, providing that baby's healthy and all is well, on the 8th day, regardless of whether or not it's Shabbat or not. Like, it's not a breaking of the Shabbat to keep that commandment. And I think it's actually maybe something special if it happens on Shabbat as well. Or am I mistaken on that?
No, absolutely right.
So, well, cool. Well, and I think,
No, we definitely do it on Shabbat. What you don't do, if your brit has been delayed past the 8th day, then it will never be on Shabbat. You only circumcise on Shabbat if it is the 8th day. But if you've already had to delay the brit for whatever reason, then you're not going to make it on Shabbat. You'll make it on Sunday instead. Okay. But I mean, look, the actual procedure itself is something you can do on Shabbat. But of course, we don't, Shabbat, we don't travel, and we don't, we don't play music or whatever. So it's just, it's a brit that's within the confines of Shabbat, but that, you can eat a lot, and you can sing a lot, and you can dance, and you can do the circumcision. You can drink a little thing of whiskey and say l'chaim, all that stuff. Yeah, it's great. It's a little bit more of a logistical nightmare, because if you're going to have a brit, like for example here, we don't have a ritual circumciser living in Karnei Shomron.
Okay.
So what that means is that your ritual circumciser, there's actually 2 in Kedumim. Okay. And so what that means is they have to come in with their family and spend the whole Shabbat.
Right. So you got to put them up, and there's logistics.
Exactly. And your relatives that don't live nearby and they want to come. Right. So basically you end up housing all these people for your brit, when you just had a baby. But everybody helps. Everybody helps, the neighbors and the relatives, and everybody helps, and it's just fine. It works.
once again, I love it. It's just part of that family that is the greater Israel, and it's just that covenant. It's just a special thing. But sometimes people might not understand it. I mean, I think you see it, or you might, it's definitely in Hollywood. It's definitely something there, but people may not really understand that it really does go back to the Bible, and it really does go back to that commandment that God gave to Abraham, and that's where the foundation is. I think it was. I'm just thinking of all the Bible stories that involve circumcision. Like Moses, when his wife Zipporah,
No.
like she that was, I don't know, maybe you could explain that story a little bit better, because that's one that I'm not sure that I've ever understood. And then the other one that comes to mind is Shechem, when the sons of Shechem wanted to marry the daughters of Israel, and basically the sons of Jacob, right? Joseph, they basically tricked the people of Shechem and said, yeah, sure, you can marry our daughters and we'll marry your daughters, but you got to do this thing first.
Well, both of those very interesting, that you mentioned those stories. The story with Moses is a very difficult story to understand exactly what was going on there. But, and that would require about an hour Bible lesson. And at the end, we would still have a lot of questions. So if I'm going to summarize it in a nutshell, what happens is Moses is going back to Egypt. God has told me you have to go to Egypt. So it's first going to Egypt, to become the savior of Israel. And his wife Zipporah has just had their second baby. And they're going, and on the way, there's this angel who comes by, and he seems to be about to kill Moses. And it's Zipporah who understands that what is the problem was that they did not circumcise this new baby. And she circumcised him. Wow. And then the angel of death leaves, and all is well. And there are people trying to understand, like, what was going on there. Why would Moses have circumcised? But one of the theories is that, you don't circumcise when you're about to go on a journey. And so Moses felt it would be dangerous to circumcise and to wait till they got to Egypt. But keep in mind that you don't see Zipporah or those two sons again until way after the Exodus from Egypt, when Jethro comes and brings them. Right. So it could be they just, this whole experience kind of said to them, Moses' job in Egypt is not a family job. Family, go back where it's safe, don't take this journey. But, and there's something that's related to this, at the beginning of Joshua, after they enter the land, in Joshua, don't remember which chapter, one of the early chapters in Joshua, it says that they ate from the wheat of the land, and the man stopped. Okay, right. Two things: the manna stopped. They ate from and they circumcised everybody. Right. And it says there that they circumcised, like, all. It's not the babies that were born in the past week. They circumcised everybody. Nation. Right. Why? Because while they were, and it says this in the book of Joshua, it's very clearly stated, because it's too dangerous to circumcise when you're traveling. So all those 40 years in the desert, it was considered too dangerous to circumcise, because there was in a traveling mode. And don't forget, it wasn't like we travel today, air conditioned buses or cars or whatever, airplanes, they were really tense. It was a difficult situation. And so no one circumcised from the time they left Egypt until they entered the land of Israel. And then they circumcised everybody. And it was a big thing. Okay. So that's, that also, it's the same thing. It fits then this interpretation that Moses didn't circumcise his son because he was starting to travel. It fits. It makes sense. But anyway, that's it. And what was the other one you talked about? Shechem. Oh, that was a big no-no. Okay. Right. I mean, look, I can't judge, because Dina had just been kidnapped and raped. Right. Yeah. And so what the brothers are trying to do is get her back. Yeah. And you have a family of 12 12 men, right?
Right.
And actually 11. Benjamin is not born yet.
Right.
Okay, 11 men, and this Joseph can't exactly be old. In other words, a bunch of these brothers are still quite young. So,
Right.
I mean, Simeon and Levi had to be big enough because they went and killed them all. But what are they, 17, 18, 19? Okay, and they're up against this whole fortified city of Shechem.
Right.
And so they use a subterfuge. Now, it may have been legitimate, although I think Jacob was not happy with it. Makes it very clear he was not happy. But the Brit Milah is not supposed to be something that is done as a trick, you know.
Right.
But yes, if somebody does want to join the Jewish faith, wants to marry, you know, like we're not in favor of intermarriage. So if somebody's not Jewish wants to marry a Jewish woman, first of all, we don't like that. Because if you want to become Jewish, it's not because you fell in love with a beautiful woman. It needs to be because you really and truly want to be Jewish. But if you do convert and become Jewish, you do have to circumcise. That is true.
Yeah. Anyway, so, you know, in some of our Christian traditions, which I am not, you know, like I was dedicated as a baby. I was actually, my mom was going to a church, so I was actually, my baby dedication was with, and I can't think of his name, but oh well, it doesn't matter. But my children were dedicated, but we don't really do, in my faith, do baby baptisms or infant baptisms. But I know that I think that some of that comes with that, the baby christening, and I think that again is giving the name and just calling it forward. You know, another one of the customs I think that I have watched you go through and not go through is redeeming of the firstborn. And, you know, you want to talk about that at all and tell us where that comes from?
Okay, that is a baby first boy. Only if a boy is the firstborn, okay?
Right.
And only if he is born in a regular kind of delivery, a vaginal delivery, not C-section, okay?
Right.
Then that baby is considered a biblical firstborn and has to be redeemed. This is also straight out of the Bible. First, it begins with Exodus 13. And God says, beginning of Exodus, the Lord spoke further to Moses, saying, consecrate to me every firstborn man and beast. The first issue of every womb among the Israelites is mine. First issue, in other words, the first one that actually, issue is really not a good word. The actual Hebrew word is breaking through the womb. In other words, the first one that goes through the womb. Okay, so if you have a C-section, you haven't gone through the womb, you got pulled out from the middle, you know. But so that's what it's about. Okay, so where do we get this redeeming from? Well, that we see later on, because in Leviticus we learn that, excuse me, not in Leviticus, in Numbers. As part of the census, the first few chapters of Numbers is all about census taking and how many is this one, how many is that one. And there's a separate census taking of the Levites, okay? And then we have, afterwards, we have a census of the Levites, you know how many there are. And then there's, in here, where I'm talking about Numbers chapter 3, we talk about the fact that, okay, now he counted the Levites, now he's got to count all the firstborns from 1 month and up. Okay, and then there's an exchange ceremony, because at this point, and I'm reading here from verse 45, take the Levites in place of all the firstborn among the Israelite people. Okay, so there's a switch here. Whereas initially the firstborn may have been the ones dedicated to God and doing the service, let's say in the tabernacle. Now the Levites take over that position, and so they get switched. And what happens is there's a discrepancy in the numbers. There are more firstborns than there are Levites. Okay,
right.
So you gotta. In other words, for every firstborn that there's a Levite, there's an equal exchange. Then you have these extra firstborns. What are you supposed to do with them? You've got to redeem them from the service of God. Okay, and so that's done by paying 5 silver shekels, and we see that in verse 47. Take 5 shekels per head. Take this by the sanctuary, weigh 20 gerahs to the shekel, and give the money to Aaron and his sons as redemption price for those who are in excess. Okay, and then we continue with this. Anyway, no, and so basically it talks about that's what they did. So from this, we have this idea that every firstborn, that remains what God says, every firstborn is for me, but they have to be redeemed because they're not going to actually be doing the service. So every firstborn has to be redeemed. And in fact, what we do is we take 5 silver coins, pure silver coins, and we give it to the priest. You take any priest, anybody whose name is Cohen, just pull him in, and he stands there, and there's a ceremony, and you give him the 5 silver coins, and he gives it back. Now, the state of Israel has a medallion, official coin and medallion service or whatever. And they've, issued these special coins and medallions. And there is a set of 5 silver coins that are engraved. This is for the redemption of the firstborn. And our firstborn, Donnie, he was a firstborn, and we had the ceremony. And at that point, we bought this set. And then we have it in the family, because really what happens is you give it to the priest, but then the priest, you can redeem it back from the priest, because you want to keep these coins in the family. So you give it to him, and then you buy it back from him. You have to give him in shekels or whatever the value of it, and you give that to him, and then he gives you back the coins. So we sell the coins. Now I have all these grandsons. Okay, so I was hoping that we would have these ceremonies. But 2 of the firstborn grandsons were actually born by C-section, so that canceled that. But we finally did have one of our grandsons was a firstborn, and we had the ceremony for them too. So we've now done it in 2 generations of the family.
That is so amazing. I mean, and again, just this whole, only when you come into the state of Israel would you have this ability to create an entire coin set. Like America wouldn't mint something like this, nobody would do this, but to just see that taking the principles that are established in the Word of God and bringing them forward to where they apply to modern day life and to where you can really use them. I love it.
Well, Tommy, what do you do, Tommy? I mean, I know you've been living in Israel for quite some time. Have you been in any of these ceremonies, the circumcision or the redemption?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's it's an amazing thing to see. I haven't actually been to the redemption, with the 5 silver coins, but I have been to circumcisions, and I've been to the bar and bat mitzvahs, and I've been to all the weddings and things like that. It's because it's amazing. All of it is amazing. Of course, we've talked about it here, but it seems like too that a lot of these, especially this particular, because we're spending a lot of time, on like the circumcision part of it. It seems like that they're. I know when back in the 60s, it was when I was born. That it was popular for non-Jews to be circumcised, and they were, doing it in hospitals, and it was just what you did. And then there's waves that come where it's not popular to be circumcised, and even actually you have people trying to pass laws against circumcision. And I wonder, that's and I don't want to go. I know we covered circumcision, but it seems like a lot of these things, even the rituals, even the firstborn. Now we're talking about, it seems like that it's not fair because the firstborn gets a special attention. He's got to, and so I have a lot of questions about, because it seems like to me that the world sees the Jewish people doing a particular thing, and for the people that are watching this program, that it's important. It's important that the Jewish people, that identity is sealed in the biblical tradition, because what we're talking about is a biblical. You just read off verses that says this is a sign between me and you. So the enemy of Israel would say, let's get rid of those signs. Stop keeping Shabbat. Stop doing circumcision. Whatever we can do, we're going to send it. we're going to send people in that are saying this is abuse, this is terrible, or there's been a lot of persecution over the years for you doing things that seal your identity. And I think it's important that we as non-Jews are serious about supporting the Jewish community. And when we see these kind of laws or these kind of things that pop up, and they're serious. There are countries in Europe trying to make laws against circumcision where Jews live, and would actually criminalize, obviously a very anti-Semitic, law, totally pointing towards the Jewish people, and it is, it is safe. It is not, like you said, there is precautions. This is not something that is done that's careless or reckless, or that's going to cause some kind of damage or harm. So I as you were talking, I felt like that we need to. There may be people listening that might not understand the intensity or the uniqueness of the Jewish people. This is part of who they are and has been for almost 4,000 years. When we're approaching a long history of when Abraham was circumcised, and Isaac obviously circumcised. This was something that started and really sealed this destiny for the Jewish people. I think.
I tell you, so you talk a lot about identity, Tommy, and I think that's something that we can really hone in on a bit on the circumcision. Like you said, there's always been a lot of anti-Semitism associated with circumcision, and in fact, it is a physical sign. If you look at the Holocaust, for example, it was much easier for a woman to pass as a Gentile, get fake papers. But for a man, it was impossible. And that's what the Nazis did. They stripped the man down. They saw he was circumcised. That's it. He was a Jew. He couldn't hide that, in any way. And so that's been something, it was always something that we did it. We did it even when it might have been frowned upon. It could have been dangerous. It revealed that you were Jewish. Look under the Romans back in the 2nd century, when there were terrible decrees against the Jews in the land of Israel. One of the decrees were not allowing circumcision. So also that was something the Jews did anyway, even when it was risky in that sense, because it wasn't just risky like it was your health. It was a matter of standing up for who you were and for your identity. The irony, of course, today in modern Israel, when it's a Jewish country, we've had situations of Jews who have come, let's say, from Russia, where in communist Russia, you couldn't circumcise, and they did their best and were quite successful in erasing the Jewish identity. And so we had Jews who came to Israel that had not been circumcised, and then they start feeling bad because they're become the odd man out. Whereas all over the world, all throughout our exile, if you were circumcised, you were pointed at, you were mocked, you were the odd man out. Here, all of a sudden, you have these Jews that want to be circumcised because they don't want to be the odd man out. And that's just like such an amazing, amazing reversal in Jewish fortune. I think it says so much about where we are today in our own free state of Israel, as opposed to where we were all those years in exile.
I think also too that, just this is a crazy statement, but just because you may have been circumcised, as a baby, and you may not, but that doesn't make you Jewish. If you're right out there, that you're, okay, you may keep Shabbat and you may do Jewish things, but that doesn't identify you now as part of the tribes. You've got an inheritance in Israel now. So that's also, it's not, here's 3 easy steps to become a Jew: get circumcised, keep Shabbat, you're done. Or 2 easy steps. Yes.
Doesn't work like that. No, but that's exactly when we talked about circumcision. It's not the physical act. It's the actual, it's the ceremony done with the ritual circumciser, who then declares this child is now entered into the covenant. And if you're not Jewish, you can't enter into the covenant. It's as simple as that.
Right, right. One of the things we were talking about, when we were discussing where to go, Sondra, you brought up a story that I had never heard before, and that involved a baby dedication or a baby baptism, I should say, of a child that was not thought that it would live. Now, this happened back in the 1850s, but that wasn't that long ago. So do you want to tell us about that, and just let's explore a little bit of unfortunate Christian Jewish history here?
Yeah, sure. I think it's important to see the context here, because we've been talking about Jewish rituals and Jewish customs. And of course, you start thinking, okay, how do Christians do it? How do Christians celebrate a baby? And so, there's christenings and there's infant baptism. These are ways that people celebrate. I don't know. Why don't you make it clear for me, Kim or Tommy, one of you, what is an infant baptism or christening or the baby dedication? What does that mean? That would be helpful to me to understand.
Sure. Well, I think, a baby christening, my understanding, and again, this is not my traditions per se, and I didn't grow up with this, but just the research that I've done. So a baby christening is like giving the baby's name. And so it is, I think it's very similar, it seems like, to the Brit, in that it is, officially naming the child and officially calling it being raised in a Christian home, and that it is there. And in infant baptism, there are some Christian denominations that do infant baptisms, and there are a lot of Christian denominations who do not do infant baptisms. I think in general, I personally don't do infant baptism, because baptism is something that has to be a personal choice, and it's a decision that you, as it doesn't have to be an adult. My children were baptized when they were, one of them was like 6 and one of them was like 10, but it was when they had made a personal choice of, I am going to follow God. I am going to, follow Jesus and be a follower of Jesus. So that's just where I'm coming from. But I think the idea of infant baptism is similar to the circumcision of, you're born into a Christian family, you're born into a Christian church, and you're going to be raised in this church, and you're going to belong to this religion for the rest of your life from day one, essentially. So that's what christening, baptism, and baby dedication. I think that's just more, usually it is just a prayer. It's a very informal thing, where usually the pastor will pray over them, and it's more of we are dedicating this baby to Christ. We're blessing. It's basically a blessing, would be what it would be, of praying over the baby and just saying, that you will follow God all of your life. I don't know, Tommy, what about you? You have any insights into any of that?
I didn't grow up either with the infant baptism deal, and I really don't have a lot of understanding on that. But I know that the dedication was something, usually an informal thing in the church, that went after a baby as soon as the mother was ready, and to come, and they would come. The parents would come in front of the congregation, and it was mainly a time that was really speaking a blessing over the child, but also to speak to the parents, telling them, giving them a call to action. They have responsibility and to
train up a child in the way it should go.
That this was a you gotta do things right, and it's important, and also for the congregation, that it was also important for the congregation to be standing with this child as it grows in the fellowship or in that church, that the congregation would be responsible for making sure that, that also watching, this child and having a part in its life and praying for it, things like that. So it's just mostly a call to the parents and to the congregation to raise this child in a right way. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, so this story that you referred to, Kim, is really coming out of the Catholic Church, and it's not at all based on like the kind of things that you've done,
Right.
because it's very much based on infant baptism. And I think, and again, I'm no expert in the Catholic Church, but as I understood, what lay behind this was a theology that said a baby who is not baptized will go to hell if they die. Okay, so this is the background of the story, but the story is as follows. In the 1850s, at the time, there was still the Papal States. Part of Italy was still governed not just religiously but politically by the Vatican, by the Catholic Church. This was really towards the end of that period of time, and there was a baby born into a Jewish family, and Jews in this point had absolutely no rights, and they lived in ghettos. And this baby, I believe, was from Bologna, and his name was Edgardo Mortara. The Mortara family, a Jewish family. A baby is born, and the family has a non-Jewish, a Catholic nursemaid working for the family, helping with the baby, helping the mother after birth, etc. And at some point, this infant is very, very ill, and they're worried that he will die. And this nursemaid, who I guess had all the best intentions of the world, was as a nice, good Catholic girl, was extremely distressed at the thought that this wonderful little cute little baby would go to hell. And therefore, she secretly baptized him into the church. Well, what happened was the baby didn't die. The baby got well. And she already was no longer in the employ of the family. She went back to her village or whatever. And at some point, she felt very, very guilty that she had baptized a baby into the church, but that church was being raised by Jews. So she confessed this to her priest. And at that point, the priest said, well, this is a mortal sin. There's no way you can keep a Catholic child in a Jewish family. And because the Vatican at that point had all the political power, literally policemen came to the house of this family and kidnapped the baby. He was like 5 or 6 years old, kidnapped him, brought him into the church. He was considered a personal favorite of the Pope. He was raised by the Pope in the Vatican. Okay. And no matter what the Jews did, and the Jews did get, there were, at that point, Jews were not powerful. They had very little influence. Jews had no rights. There were 2 wealthy, powerful Jews in the whole world, Moses Montefiore and one of the Rothschilds, who did whatever they could, went to kings and queens and princes, but nobody could do anything. This child remained in the church. And the parents had no access to him. They couldn't see him. They couldn't speak to him. He was raised completely as a Catholic. And it's only when he was a young man that they had an opportunity to meet him. He was a priest, and he never went back to his family, and he never left Catholicism or the priesthood. So this was, of course, it was a very famous case at the time. It was written about like all over Europe and the United States. And the Jewish community was absolutely powerless to prevent this. But this all came from this belief in the Catholic Church that infant baptism was so important, because otherwise this baby would go to hell. And, well, very anti-Semitic, though, and how it was taken. Very much. Right. That doesn't mean everybody who believes in anti-baptism are anti-Semites, by no means. But unfortunately, this is where the Catholic Church was, at least in those years.
Right. No, I think it's a very important story because it really gives some history, because as a Christian, I'd never heard that story ever, but clearly it was something that you grew up with, something that was still talked about today, and something that is still unfortunate, a very unfortunate blight on Christianity, because I definitely, you know, like you said, we assume that the nursemaid was doing it with the best of intentions. She was doing it out of a pure heart. However, she probably had no idea what ramifications were going to come out of that, and
Well, I think,
to
no, I
rip a
think she
baby
knew.
out of, well, yeah, but to rip
No,
a
I think
baby
she
out of his
knew, but you
parents.
see, you're
True.
talking about a Catholic world that everybody,
Yeah.
in a sense, everybody really and truly believed they were doing this for the
Good of the
good of the
right, for the
baby.
soul of the baby. Sure.
Right, right. And
Sure.
of course, we thank God Christianity is
Oh,
beyond that. Not
yes.
all of Christianity, but a lot of Christianity has moved beyond that to the point where they can just respect Jews and understand that we can agree to disagree, but we're not going to be, running around with the sword and trying to convert Jews. It doesn't work like that. I'm not doing it to you, don't do it to me. But,
Right.
that was a time when, I would say in most of the Christian world, at
Yeah.
one level or another, Catholic and Protestant, there was this inability to look at Jews and see what it is they're doing, to see how biblically based it is, and just to.
Right. Right.
It's
Well, moving
amazing.
on. Oh, go ahead, Tommy.
No, I'm just saying it's amazing. I'm still in awe that Jews still exist today. With all of
Right.
the, I mean, really, I mean, how in the world do you live for so long in that kind of
Hmm.
environment? I mean, we're not talking about breaks and, I mean, obviously it would become more intense at certain periods of time, but this was a pretty constant deal for the Jewish people for thousands of years. Um,
Yeah.
that I just it's just hard for me to fathom how a people exist, a religion exists for so long under those circumstances. It's a miracle. It's just a miracle.
It really
Yeah.
is. Well, well, I want to maybe bring it to a close. I just want to read some scripture because I think maybe you can put a little Jewish part on something that is very, very familiar to Christians. I think we read it at least every Christmas, if not more often than that. This is out of Luke chapter 2. Um, And while they were there, the time came for her, Mary, to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and laid him in a manger, because there was no room for them in the inn. And then further down, this is verse 22, Luke 2:22. And when the time came for their purification, according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every male who first opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or two young pigeons. So, that's something, I think that we read it as
We
Christians
just,
and we
right.
don't even understand it.
Well, they both, but, and I didn't even know this, when I discuss both of these subjects, the circumcision, the redemption of the firstborn, I had never heard of that verse that in Luke that you just read. But
Right?
in both cases, it's referring to something that's in the Torah. And I quoted both of those scriptures for you. Okay?
Right.
Because
I
the
know.
first one, it talks about the sanctify to me, the firstborn, the one who
Right. The
opens the womb.
firstborn.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's Exodus 13:2. That's what it's referring to. And the second one, when he talks about dedicating herself and purifying herself, that's
Yeah.
Leviticus 12. Okay, now I read you the verse about on the seventh day, on the eighth day, you need to circumcise. But
Right.
the next, the next verse 4, she shall remain in a state of blood purification for 33 days. She shall not touch any consecrated thing nor enter the sanctuary until the period of purification is completed. Okay? And then what happens? On the completion of a period of purification, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb in its first year. So basically, what they did in that ceremony clearly was they did two things at once, okay? After 33 days, she could come to the temple and become purified and bring her sacrifice. But meanwhile, at the 30 days, she redeems the firstborn by giving the 5 silver shekels to the priest, also in the temple. So that's what she did.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that great?
It's there. Right. It's there.
Black and white.
That, you know, we have differing opinions about who Jesus was, but from our perspective, Jesus was a Jewish boy, you know?
Yes.
So
yes.
all of the, and even from your perspective, that's how he was raised, you know?
Definitely. He grew up in a Jewish world. Absolutely.
Right. And so these customs that you read, for me, I find it fascinating to read about these types of things in the New Testament, because it tells me about how Jews lived at that time. And what we've just read here is confirmation to exactly what you were saying, Tommy. You said, isn't it amazing that the Jewish faith is still around? We're still keeping the same customs. Well, the New Testament is a testimony to the fact that then, which is already 2,000 years ago, then Jews lived the same way that Moses commanded them to live, you know, like what?
4,000 years.
2,000 years earlier than that. So, or 1,000 years earlier than that. This is amazing. Okay. And then I tell you my story and how we celebrate it. It's this unbroken chain. And it all starts from the commandments in Scripture.
Yeah. It's great.
I think it's also the hypocrisy of the church, and I'm not saying this to bash, you know, my faith, but I'm saying it as a wake up call, because we really have to understand that this is a holy thing. Luke, the writer here, Luke, is making a point to say, is to identify very, very plainly the Jewishness of Jesus, the Jewishness of Yeshua. So this is absolutely this is a point here that every Christian, you can't just now disrespect Judaism. This doesn't even make any sense. You're the one who you follow, you worship, you have everything, your whole faith is based around, did these things and was, you know, this is who he was. And so to disrespect or to walk in any kind of anti-Semitism is crazy. It's not rational. It's not rational at all, except that there was something else going on between Christians and Jews throughout this time, and we got off track. We got way off track.
We did.
And I think, you know, as a place of closing here, we got to get back on track. We got to recognize the importance of the Jewish community, and we got to of the Jewish identity. We're using that word a lot, identity, but this identity is holy. It is a set apart deal that even the verse before it, verse 21, talks about his circumcision. You know, he was circumcised. So why would we have a Christian Bible that even talks about those kind of things? You know, why? Because we've been so against those kind of anything in the law of Moses. But all of this is happening, and we need to understand it as something that's very, very holy and sacred to our own faith, and especially as we support the Jewish people, as we support Israel and its foundation, and not to get these things confused. It was important for us to build this relationship now, 2,000 years later, and I think that this is a great thing that we're doing, to talk about these things on a regular basis, to do it. So I really appreciate both of you and Sondra. You know, our friendship is for many years now, and what a blessing. And I always love our discussions, and it's, you know, looking forward to many more.
Yeah, you know, that's what I was just thinking here, Tommy, was along those same lines. Here we can have the ability, because of our friendship and because of our relationship, to ask these kind of awkward questions, or, you know, like, well, why do you do this, or what do you mean, you know? And we can do this, and we can really talk about these things, because there is this great divide between us, because something that is so, like, I don't want to say blasé, but I mean, you grew up with it. It's just, it's part of who you are, right? We have those same things in us as well. And being able to just cross those and explain them and ask questions. I love it. I love just seeing where we're at, and thank God we're not, 1850s, and thank God that
Right.
we're here today and we can have these conversations. It truly, it is time of redemption, right?
Absolutely. And I just want to end and say thank you to both of you, because I think both of you as Christians, and you each have your own style of Christianity, but both of you represent a growing number of Christians who are trying to face and reach across that divide. And it's people like you that are making the difference and are really fighting anti-Semitism and really pioneering the change that we're seeing happening all over, where Jews and Christians really can build these friendships and grow in our own faith, even as we understand each other better.
Amen.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. You bet. Have a great day.
Yep.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.